We're very pleased to welcome Dr. Niall Madoom, Ireland's second Ombudsman for Children, to our conference today. Niall has kindly agreed to be our keynote speaker. Niall, who is a counselling and clinical psychologist and was previously the Director of Investigations at the Ombudsman for Children's Office. He was appointed by Michael D. Higgins in February 2015, and as Ombudsman, Niall has focused on generating an Ireland where children and young people are actively heard, particularly those who are most vulnerable. So without further delay, I would like you to pass you on to Niall.
Okay, thank you very much, Claire and Sarah. I really appreciate it. Hopefully everyone can hear me. I'm just trying to get the final bits of the technology sorted so I can get my PowerPoint go. I also want to thank you for online, so I now have to spend 30 minutes trying to make sure my double chin will show. Hopefully it'll be okay. If I could put the PowerPoint up, please, Drew. Yeah, okay. Okay, and again, just 1 second, I just move, sorry, I just have to move my picture away. Okay, thanks, really delighted to be here and a really exciting conference you've all together. I'm looking forward to spending the morning and learning a lot from it. So without further ado, I'll move on to my own slide. I know we want to get to questions as well because that's part of the day. Now, I hope. Okay, just a little bit about the office. Only I'm going to tell you quickly. Some know about the office, some may not. So essentially, we set up under the Act in 2002, Ombudsman for Children Act, and Emily Logan was the first Ombudsman in 2004. She started. We're an independent body, and my term of office is signed. My contract is signed by President Higgins. So essentially, what that means, I don't report to anyone. I don't report to a minister. I don't to a Secretary General or department. My accountability is directly to the Oireachtas, so allows for cross-party investigation and interrogation and transparency. Here I would attend perhaps 3, 4, 5 different Oireachtas. It could be wherever children are engaged, wherever for children to be discussed. So I might go to the Department, the Committee on Children. It could be on health. It could be on housing, education. And again, that's where the transparency and the direct accountability is. The senators and the TDs can ask us any questions at that point. And the whole idea is that I have a 6-year term, and within that term, I'm meant to push as hard as I can to improve the rights and promote the rights and protect the rights of children. And I'm not answerable to the government or to any individual minister on that independent task. And it's a crucial part of the mechanisms we have in place for protecting children across the country. So essentially that's the office. We get approximately between 15 and 1600 complaints a year from all sorts of people, mainly parents, but often a lot of professionals as well. And I'll talk a little bit about that later on. Okay, so looking at the system, we talk about systems all the time. We talk about one of the things that I have to do is take investigations and maladministration within systems and where people have followed the procedures and processes and legislation. But essentially, and I've said this many times in many different civil servants and public servants, that the system, any system that's put in place works for 85% of the people that we have involved in that system. So again, if you think of, if you're living at home, you're married with kids, you have 2 kids, both parents working, your system is who gets up in the morning, who makes the breakfast, who makes the lunches, who drives the kids to school. Things work well four times in the week, and then one day in the week somebody has forgotten something and we have to turn back. Somebody gets sick and one of the parents have to stay at home, and the system has to change and adapt and adjust. And that's a crucial part of what we do. So every system has to be flexible. But if you add into that a system that's catering for and adjusting for children who have a disability, and the amount of differentiation and difference within disability, then that's crucial to have that flexibility in the system. You know, no one child with Down syndrome is the same as the other child with Down syndrome. No child with ASD is the same as another child. So the flexibility is a crucial part of that system. I think it's something we haven't built in the way that I would like it anyway, and I think it leads to a lot of problems. It's something that I think we can certainly enhance and start to build into the future. And I think oftentimes the system fights that flexibility because they feel that it's consistency is a part of it. But we can talk about that again later on. Things that I was asked to do today is to do a particular case called Molly, and I'll move on to that now. Essentially, is a complaint that came to us, I think, in 2017. We published it in 2018. Molly is a young girl who was born with disabilities right from birth. At birth, her birth parents were involved, and somewhere around the 3rd or 4th month of her life, she was fostered by a fabulous family who were already fostering another child with disability. She was dependent on her foster carers, and still is, for feeding, toileting, bathing, dressing, and obviously transfer and travel and mobility as well. When we investigated and we looked at the concerns that the foster parent mother came with concerns, and essentially what she came to us with was she was fed up, she was tired. Her child was now 14 years of age, fighting for every single step of the way to get what the child needed, nothing extra, nothing special. And the system wasn't helping her and was fighting against her oftentimes. When we investigated that, we found it was right. We found that neither the HSE nor TUSLA saw Molly as a child in care and a child with a disability. The two services looked at their own side of things. So the HSE saw the child as a child with a disability and ignored the fact she was in care, and TUSLA looked at a child and ignored the fact she had a disability. And the two services didn't work in tandem for the child. The lack of coordination there, so that services and supports from both organisations were sufficient, and they were also delayed through arguments for funding. And again, I know I'm speaking to social know what this like, where you know a parent deserves something or should get something, but you spent months upon months fighting for that particular course, or the funding or the refund, and it's wasted energy, and it also drains the goodwill of foster care at many times, and it's something that I think we can fix if there's a will for it. Oftentimes when we take a case, we bring it to investigation, not just for the benefit of the individual child, but we look and see if the system has anything to learn from it and can we impact other children into the future. And when we did that, we asked the question, is there any other children like Molly in the system? It took us about 6 months to push TUSLA and HSE to come up with any other numbers, and they said they couldn't come up with them. Eventually, TUSLA came up with a figure of 471 children that they knew from 2015 were in the system who were moderate to severe disability in care. HSE agree with those numbers and wouldn't confirm their numbers, but this is the number we felt. So we found through one complaint that there was a huge cohort of children in that circumstance. So likewise, it's a huge cohort of foster parents as well. And so it's an important element of the report that we worked on not just Molly herself, but others. Just there we go. Okay, so again, the system, and this is an important part, and this is something we're very much aware about all the time. The system is not just about rules and regulations and forms and triplicate and going up the line to your line manager and area manager and top of HSE. It's not about that. It's about the individuals within the system. And that's where Ireland really, really shines. We have a lot of really dedicated individuals, social workers, who do above and beyond their call of duty, who do it in trying times and with limited resources. And indeed, to exemplify that, Molly came to us through the insistence of a social worker, and we reported this one day, and then 2 days later we brought the report directly to the Oireachtas Committee on Children. And in that, Sean Sherlock the TD spotted that the social worker, one who advised the foster mother to make a complaint against two state bodies, one of which was their own employer. And again, from my point of view, I think that's the way it should be. It's an emphatic and important part to advocate for children, and you do that system. And we in the Ombudsman for Children are legitimately statutorily set up to be an alternative to court. So if the system isn't working and a parent or a child has to to fight the system, and they've made complaints how the complaints have turned out, they have the right to come to us, and you as social workers have the right to suggest that that's an option. And we do work with many trainee social workers as well, just to inform them about our office, tell them about children's rights, and to also make sure that they know that they have a role as an advocate into the future if they ever need us, and they can see us as a resource. So that Molly's mother somewhat pointed in this direction, we were delighted to come forward. And similarly, in the system, the foster carers are part of it. You know, this system is built around the child. It should be built around the child. And the first two people that the child need to have support from is the foster, and then the social workers that support them. And from my point of view, it's imperative that every effort is made to support all the exceptionally committed foster carers that are looking after children with moderate to severe disability. And you really have to admire and puts their family forward and puts themselves forward to work in this area. It's a job, it's a vocation, it's something that they really love. And again, this family had twice. And we don't make their life easy. And that's a real shadow on our society, that they've stepped forward and are willing to work with these 70-odd children that we're talking about. Don't have an easy ride. The alternative is residential care, and we've come out of that. Ireland put many of our children with disabilities into residential care for many years, and it didn't work. And apart from the economic cost, which is a huge difference, it's probably 5 times more expensive to be in residential than it is in foster care. There's a huge emotional warmth that comes from being part of a family and being loved and looked after on an individual basis. But then you also have to know that the system needs to know how many children are in this circumstance, so that you can plan, you can put your budget for it, you can know what the child is going to need, you can anticipate what the child is going to need. And again, I'll talk a bit further on. Okay, so looking at Molly's, and again, it's a crucial part of what we did. The case was originally published in 2018. We did a review after 12 months in 2019, and then January this year we did a 2-year review as well. And there's a couple of positive points. One is that those children, those 470-odd children, are no longer invisible within the system. We now know them. We've called Tusla tell us in 2020 that I believe there's 477 children in that sense. Tusla and HSE together better on that. There's real improvements in that regard. And on an individual basis, Molly is 2 years down the line staying within the family, because when she came to us and when the case came to us there, and that she might have to move out of that family. But again, to the credit of HSE, and wrapped around her, they gave her all the support she needed. They facilitated her in anything that was required, and supported both the foster parents and Molly herself. And she's spent another 2 years there, not guaranteed won't move out again. Parents, as ever, parents get older, and it could be difficult. But point of view, there's a real positive example of the two agencies coming together and making a difference in the child's life. It's not all roses. The HSE still haven't committed to how many children are in this category. I can't for the life of me fathom it. They say it's a definition situation in which they don't agree with the definition that Tusla are using. They're very proud of the fact, and again, HSE and Tusla have done a good job, and that they're able to tell us now how many children are moving from 17 to 18 years of age, and they're able to plan for that, which is fantastic. However, my rebuttal to that, or my follow-up to that, is that if you can do that for the children who are turning 18, you can do it for the child who was born at 0 and you know who's has a learning disability. So someone like Molly, from my point of view, the planning should have started on the day she was born, because you know she's not going to get hugely different. She's not going to grow out of it. She's not going to improve an awful lot, but you can predict a lot of her issues, and you can plan accordingly. You don't have to fight for the resources. You know those resources are going to be needed at some stage in their life. Those are things that still need to be needed. The right-hand side there just shows the CHO's areas for HSE where limited progress is made in engaging on these issues. There's still things I think we need to improve on, and we need to really make a difference on that the agencies are able to identify, acknowledge these children, because by not acknowledging them, we're leaving them in an abyss. We're making it harder for you as social workers to deal with it, making it harder for all the social workers involved in both HSE and TUSLA to give the best possible service to those children. And it's something I think we really need to move forward on. Okay, when I agreed to this, Sarah or Claire would have sent me on a number of questions, and these are a couple of questions that I hope will be answered as I go through the next part of the discussion and the slides. Again, I'm happy to discuss them a little bit later in the questions if they come up at that stage, but it's crucial that the child-centred practice is what we're all about. Cooperation is the only way to make that happen. You know, what's up there for child-centred practice and collaborative working? Again, I'll show you that some of the successes in HSE and TUSLA have made commitments on them as we go into it, but just hopefully this will allow you to see some of those positives as well. And I think it's important to recognise this, you know, when our job is to change systems and to make systems better into the future for children, we acknowledge that systems don't want to change. They try to maintain themselves and seek equilibrium. So sometimes to change a system, you need to shake it up and disrupt that equilibrium. There's conflict, and that's what our complaints and investigations do, and that's why we use our investigations so they can really have a wider system. I think you need to have fights, you need to have rows, you need to have people who have to reimagine what they've done and acknowledge that maybe it's not working for the people they work for. So Molly's case shows system children with disability, and the state. You know, this is from 1988 or 2018, after we published first an op-ed from Claire Edwards in UCC, and she said the state seems to have built a system which prides itself on impenetrability and inaccessibility. And I can't disagree with that. Again, when you look at the Molly thing, it just seems, let's make this as difficult as possible for every single resource so that people will stop asking for the resource. And that works if you're going to try, if your sole aim is to try and stay within a budget. But if you're the social worker trying to provide and trying to make sure that parent isn't going to collapse with a nervous breakdown, that is the worst thing you can possibly do. She also acknowledged that there seems to be a perception that disability is a specialism owned by particular professions in the health and social care arena, and they're the ones who do disability. She went on to also say that she believes that perception comes from Ireland's rural welfare state and the history of development of charitable organisations, which in turn took on responsibility for providing services to children and adults with disability. And we know that throughout our country, you're probably working for many of them, the Section 38 and Section 39 organisations who at the century were the ones who really stepped up to help the state provide for the marginalised children, whether it's children with disabilities, children with mental health, children in homelessness, children in poor place for the education system. It was the religious and the charitable organisations who stepped. We need to recognise that everybody involved in the system got on responsibility for disability and treat the child as the child. Again, we see a real danger with that is this recent development with St. John of God's, where charities are now looking and saying, listen, we can't continue to maintain this system for you if you don't fund us properly and resource us properly. And that may or may not be the tip of the iceberg. Other organisations are willing and ready to start making that call on the state. So again, this is the system that we're working in, and we've got to change it and make the child at the centre of it. And I have a few examples of that, hopefully. You know, just move. Okay. Last year I put this together, this sort of slide to try and know I think the system works. Anybody who has children will know children don't run in straight lines. Children, they're not homogenous, they're not the same, they don't always stay the same. They start off one way and they go in a different direction. They just, you know, a ball of energy and different. Even my own example, my first child was full of energy, never stopped, couldn't stop running. I spent all my time chasing them, trying to protect them, pulling them back from the edge of the road, playing football all the time, whatever it might have been. Second child came along, we were all set for the same thing, and we ended up with somebody who would keep looking behind us because they were watching the flowers, they were looking at the sky, and it was a fabulous differentiation. But each child is different, and we have to treat them differently. We can't expect homogeneity. We can't plan for homogeneity. We have to plan for that flexibility and that difference. But unfortunately, these are the way our education and our departments are built. They're built in straight lines, in silos, parallel to each other. And if a child moves in, they can with those children. They work with them in whatever way they can, but they don't recognize them as the core of their system. They have a system within the Department of Health and Department of Children, Department of Education, and that works for them. And the children are the ones who feel it. And that's so wrong. That was my thinking in 2019. And then I thought of it again today as I prepared for this, again, slightly differently. Children hasn't the slightest, but my thinking has changed a wee bit in that I think not even being as parallel and as close together as that. And again, it's something we have to think about, and how we can make those children more core. And one final thing, and again, I've been some on the system as such, but I think it just is the last what I want to put up here to highlight. I think that was an approach cartoon just to put up. Somebody asked us to create a safety net for children, but it wasn't our responsibility to get design. We have a set. Someone is still falling through it. That's not our problem. I think that's what we need to start getting past. We need to move from a system that is protecting the system and doing what it's at the bare minimum. You can even see it, it's, assessment of needs. We put a report, Jess, and you can see that there's the statutory obligations there, but the bare minimum is being done to fulfill that statutory obligation. And we need to move to this sort of system now. And again, I'm not going to try and rearrange Department of Health and their silos, but if we move to a system that's child-centered, and if every one of the people in there put the child's best interests at the heart of their decision-making, we could change this forever. We could make a huge difference and a huge impact for every child, and indeed for every civil servant and public servant who works child. Instead of having to find how to get through things and manage things and adjust things, you would have a whole different format for what satisfies your system. And I think, again, you're looking at three systems there: education, children, and health. And I put in the Department of Justice as well, because children interact in those ways, and they interact at different times with those different systems. But if the best interest is there, and it's the same Molly, if we take Molly as the centre of that, her schooling is impacted by how her health is. Her foster caring is impacted by how her education is. They're all interacting together, but they're all interacting separately at the moment, instead of putting Molly at the centre of it, and the real health, the real core of their design and their work should be that way. Again, let me just, one more time, yeah. This is another way of thinking about it. They've interacted at the moment. The departments don't necessarily see themselves as crossing over in an awful lot, and they try to limit how they cross over. It's something that they really have built and facilitated themselves to keep thinking that way and to make it as limited as possible. So let's fight for resources, and why there's a separation between HSE and TUSLA when a foster care situation with a child with disability. But if we want to improve it, we've got to recognise and indeed embrace the overlap that's there, and acknowledge how much work has been done with each other, and how children are affected by education. Education affects their health. Health, in fact, affects them as foster parents and foster children. And we really need to put the best interest of the child and the voice of the child at the centre of that system. And that'll help them to improve the system. Again, I oftentimes liken this to a restaurant. If I'm running a restaurant and I want to get the best out of that restaurant, I want to keep improving it, I don't go and somebody walks in with, obviously somebody's 21st and they come in with their parents and their family. You don't just ask the parents, how did you get on here? Did you enjoy that? You ask the 21-year-old, and the 21-year-old will be seriously disappointed if you ask their mother how they got on with it. You've got to ask the people at the heart of your work, how is it going for you? What do you want from it? What more do I need? What needs do you have? And this is something we've already legislated. We've committed to the UNCRC, and we've also committed more recently to the UN Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disability. So we are really legislated and statutorily obliged to do, and the government need to do this more. And again, these areas are crucial. CAMHS, homelessness, abuse are all still part of that centre. So if you've got Molly or any child in the centre of that, these things are what they're affected by. These are the systems they're interacting with at all times. We've got to make it easier. You've got to ask what the child needs, not what the system can provide for any individual. It's got to be much more adaptable and flexible and put the child at the centre of it every single time. And there's positives, huge positives. They're now integrating disability, from my point of view, massive step forward, and the children and disability area will be fantastic. There's a €2 billion budget that goes with that, but it's more about the cooperation and collaboration that can happen. The interagency joint protocol, part of the Molly update was that HSE, Paul Reid, the CEO, committed to confirmed his desire to work with Bernard Gloucester to strengthen relationships and work more collaboratively. And that's fantastic. And he's going to do that through the joint protocol. He also committed that community operation teams, chief officers and heads of social care will work together to ensure, and this is very important, a specific ring-fence proportion of resources is delivered to children in foster care. We're recognising them as a cohort that are crucial and getting the funding that goes with that. Bernard Gloucester, who I'm looking forward to hearing later on, has also committed to working on legislation to mandate multi-agency working. Again, if we need to mandate it, let's do that and make sure that puts the children at the core of the work that's been done. They've established a national HSE and TUSLA group to provide oversight and governance with regards to the joint protocol. So again, the joint protocol begins to live in real life. There's TUSLA area managers will oversight for it. And there's joint workshops between HSE and TUSLA throughout this year. And I know my director of investigations went to speak to one of those joint workshops earlier in the year. So again, it's crucial. And I'm pushing for at a governmental level to have shared budgets so that we recognise this child. Again, if Molly had been born and the parents had decided to sue the state, you would come up with an amount of money that it would cost to keep Molly at the best level, and you pay out your number of millions for that. What I'm saying is these children are going into foster care. We owe them the best. And we can predict what they need over the next 4 or 5 years. And you need to ring fence a budget, multi-annual budget, puts the best interest of the child forward. And finally, the last piece I want to put in there is just the idea that if we have a best interest clause and every social worker or any person within the system says, I made this decision on the basis of best interest of this child, and they note it down and say, this is the rationale I had for that. Someone like me who comes to oversight the decision can look at that and say, okay, and I might still disagree with the decision, but we can see where it's coming from. And I think that's the sort of protection that social workers and all civil servants need, is that support to be flexible in individual cases. I'm going to go past this one quickly. This is just fairly much allowing myself some time for questions. This is my poor construction, but essentially the idea is that we've got HSE and TUSLA wrapping around Molly. She's in the centre of that. We've got predicted expenses, so we know what the foster care doesn't have to worry about the next wheelchair cost or the hoist or the changing the car. It's all predicted and it's planned for and it's accepted. It's a much easier thing. That takes the stress off the social worker, who can then spend much more time with the people and individuals rather than fighting and writing forms. It takes the stress off the foster care. And what it does is, personally for the foster care, it says, okay, I don't have to question myself as to whether I'm a good enough parent because I haven't got the resources, which is what we heard from Molly's mother, foster mother. She felt she wasn't doing well by the child because she wasn't getting these things. And it was the system that was stopping her. It wasn't not being a good enough parent. And when you've got a care believes and feels and healthy and safe because the system, can you imagine much more they can Molly? And that's the way we need in the future. I'm also not naive with this one. You know, this is what I say to my staff all the time, and it's what, as I said, it's what I look for from clients. We can't get perfection. We're never going to get it. The system changes all the time, people all the time. So it's looking for. I've seen progress here. I'm delighted with the support we've got from Bernard Gloucester and from the CEOs are really committed to changing this. And I think we have an opportunity here in the next 12 to 18 months to make a difference in changing the system for the better of the children that are involved. Finally, I just want to say thank you to you and to all the social workers who are involved in this work. It's fantastic work, and I really really want to finalize here and go into the questions now, if that's okay. So again, thank you very much, and hope you enjoy the rest of the day. Okay, just looking here, I have a question here that it's so important for social workers to feel safe and confident in providing information to parents about the Ombudsman's office. I think there's sometimes a reluctance among social workers to do this if the concerns relate to their own. Again, what we've said to all social workers and all professionals, we're speaking to psychologists and to social workers, social care, guards. Ring our office. It's a free phone number. There's no problem having a conversation. We don't necessarily, what we do is avoid complaints. If we get you at an early stage, ring us and chat to us. We might point you and post you to somewhere else. And I think it's the safest thing to do. That's proper advocacy. That's proper support for the child and the child at the centre. And we are a legitimate agency to engage. If the complaint has gone to the proper services and the parent is still not happy, then we can come in and do what we can for them. Hopefully that helps. Second question here I have now. When worked across education, disabilities and children in care, I wish there was a greater sharing of skills and understanding across the different sectors so that all of those working with the child become a team around the child rather than teams from different agencies with different agenda and perceived responsibility. You've got, Shell, as far as I'm concerned, you are a team, but you aren't being supported to be that. Molly is the core. Molly is the reason you're all, whether she's in education, whether she's your an SLT, whether you're foster support, so you're all working for her. And I think if we can keep reminding ourselves of that individually, it's my job to try and push the system to support you to do that. And I think that's a great way to put it. Education, disability, children in care, we're all working together for the same customer, same client. More importantly, it's a fantastic child or children in that circumstance, and be able to do something positive for them is something I really think we all enjoy. And I think people just need to embrace that, and I think hopefully they start to embrace that soon and make it easier for you. I'm not sure if there's any other questions there at this stage. Okay, Claire, will I hand you back to Claire or Sarah at this stage? Thank you.